What made it so good was we were effecting change. More women, the racial scene, the drug and alcohol abuse. So you celebrate change. Don't ask to tell, you say, it's fair, it's better, it's time, it should be. I'm going to do what I can in my meager way to facilitate it. If I ever have a legacy, whatever that is, it'll be he liked leadership. I'm a student of leadership. Leadership is my bag. My God, when an airman writes me a note, an email out of the clear blue and says, "You made me think," and so I go, "Wow, that's money in the bank." I wouldn't take $1 million for that. To think that maybe you help somebody, because so many people help me.
It's not supposed to be like when we were serving. Because we're better, we're more educated. I look at the educational level of our enlisted force today when I go to the senior academy. It's amazing. We've got people with PhDs, enlisted people with PhDs, master's degree. When I retired in 1981, I was one of the few chief master sergeants in the Air Force, not of the Air Force, in the Air Force, that had a bachelor's degree. And that's because I came in the service 2.5 years of college, so I almost got drafted. But I finished, tuition assistance and so forth. So, I believe that, we got to keep continuing to do that and learn from those of us that are in the past.
And when I became Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, that was one of the first 3 things after I met with the former Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force. Had a week's meeting with them and says, what do we need to do? And I picked their brains, and the Levito Award was born, the first Sergeant of the Year program was born, things of that nature. And went to General Gabriel with it. We were flying to Europe on a visit, and he read that memo from the meeting while he was in his compartment on speckled trout. And the aide comes out and says, the chief wants to see you. So I go back. He says, I like it. When we get to USAFE, release it to the world. I said, sir, it ain't been staffed. I said, I'll prepare a message for you. Twix is what we called them in those days. I'll prepare a message for you to send to the Air Force announcing it. He says, nope, it's your program, sign it. I said, General, we ain't staffed it. Okay, do it. So it was the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force program for the Air Force was born. Approved on that airplane.
Well, again, it was part of a change, and bases were closing, and in a lot of cases hospitals were closing, and we only had so many people we could keep in the force, and as valuable as the medical crew was to us, we had to keep a majority of the force in the warfighting positions because we were a deployed force. And so we needed something to fill in a gap, and I think it's turned out to be an incredible success. And so I think the bigger thing was just being visible and communicating, and I think it's a sign of leaders when there's something controversial that has to be talked about, that you in fact face the crowds. And I can remember being in every movie theater imaginable, never watching a show, but being there giving presentations for people about TRICARE. And it wasn't just active duty people, it was retired people as well, who had become used to the idea of going to the base hospital and getting care on a standby basis if that's what was required. So we're able to make that click, relieve a lot of the anxiety for people, and just coach them through the process and make sure they were armed with as much information as they needed.
And so there was no doubt in my mind before I ever got into service that women could do anything that men could do. You know, that was kind of a given. You know, later on when I became the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, we had an issue with gender integrated training. So myself and my other enlisted counterparts in the other services were kind of tasked by the Joint Chiefs to fight this battle. And so we would do op-ed pieces, we would write, you know, very terse letters to congressmen. We got into a lot of verbal altercations, quite honestly, that went very strong verbal altercations with members of Congress over this issue. But it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. They were going to set women back in our military, and that was absolutely wrong. And so we fought that very hard. I'm very proud to say that, you know, when you look at the evolution of women in the military, you know, today we had 2 women who just completed Ranger training in the Army. The Air Force is going to look to see if they can accommodate them in special operations and lift all of the restrictions. I give the Air Force great credit for giving women the opportunity to, you know, hold the highest positions and things like that. So.
Throughout my career, I had opportunities to think about the Air Force in a much broader sense than perhaps many NCOs do. Not right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just where you are the sum total of the things that you've experienced. And so I lacked experience in some areas and had over-experience in other areas. So you bring to the table who you are. And I think I did my best. Knew nothing about what AMC was going through, the challenges or the space business or the the old SAC stuff or the missile wings and the bombers. I just hadn't been exposed to those people, and so I really wasn't sure what the issues were. And frankly, for me, the biggest challenge was to get smart on those so that you didn't walk around stupid on stuff. You try to go out there and get a little bit of background. I always found my experience space was like 5 miles wide and about 2 inches deep. Just don't ask too many questions, but I try to understand people. But mostly, I believe it's just about connecting with people and trying to do the right thing.
From the very beginning of that time frame of going in, there was that question about, the readiness of our force and the readiness of our enlisted force. Were they as ready as they needed to be? Yeah. The uniform. I mean, that was Again, you know, when I deployed into Kuwait and Bahrain, we looked like a rainbow outfit. If we went out for physical fitness, is that you got every color, shorts, pants. I mean, you don't. I mean, and then I go over and I look at my Army and my Marine, brethren, and they're out there in their fitness uniforms, in formation, you know, team effort together, and all the visual part of it and everything. And so I went into the boss and says, "Boss, you know, we need a fitness uniform to go with this as well." And he agreed, and you know, he funded that right out of his pocket. We didn't even palm it. We just did it, you know. And that was the other thing there, is that we were about changing the mindset, changing the culture of our airmen. And I would tell you today, we're much better for it.
We're in two wars right now. We have airmen that are in the fight every second of every day. We have airmen being wounded, we have airmen being killed, and I'm gonna be their chief. And so from that moment on, my focus was, you've got to do the right things. You've got to make sure your airmen are properly equipped and trained to go over there and they come home safely. So I took it very serious, and so there's some things that maybe I would have thought about doing while I was the chief, but the focus was on all those airmen deploying and those airmen in harm's way, to do everything we can to provide them the safety they need and the equipment they need and the training they need and the leadership they need to come back. So that was my focus the whole time I was there, was trying to take care of airmen and their families and testify before Congress to make sure the conditions were right for us to be successful and to keep us going forward as an Air Force to do the right things.
There were a couple of us from the joint community that the Chief of Staff saw value in and was able to bring that talent back to the Pentagon, and then to be selected, coming from a joint position. In fact, I remember the day that we were appointed. And that, to me, says an awful lot about where we're at as joint. That we can have an airman, a very senior airman in our United States Air Force working in a joint community, and bring them back and be the 16th Chief Master in the Air Force, I think says an awful lot about us as a profession, and us as an institution called the United States Air Force.
So, you talk about a lot of things, as you can appreciate, just like Chief Roy talked with me, and the successes to him, the former Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, and we were always a resource to the sitting Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. They always have been for me. It is about building new relationships up here, not just around the Air Force at large, and you realize just how big our Air Force is when you step into a position like this. But it's the staff, it's the joint staff, it's the elected officials that you will represent our Airmen and Air Force to. It's a different connection with the American people. So kind of getting your head wrapped around that in a fast and furious pace is challenging. The best advice is to kind of work at it methodically. And I really give, anything that has changed in our Air Force that has been good and been positive, I give all the credit to our airmen that have done it. And anything that hasn't worked out too well, then we got to own that, and I'll take my part of that ownership, because, we would have hoped we could have done better.